Umbar sits in a sun-bleached trench. Half buried are the wooden ribs of an ancient dreadnought. In the Second Age, this basin constructed entire imperial armadas. The architects of this harbor were the Númenóreans, the most advanced mariners in human history, sailing across the ocean from their island home to establish permanent colonies in Middle-earth. Umbar was their primary foothold. They turned this natural bay into a fortress of stone and wood, building a heavily fortified imperial stronghold. But the King's Men, the faction that claimed Umbar, had broken away from their forefathers' ways. They openly opposed the Valar and ruled the local coastal populations through fear and exploitation. These docks represent the limit of their ambition. They possessed the highest engineering in the world, yet the empire that commissioned them lacked the stability to survive its own pride. The rot started with an obsessive terror of death. The Númenóreans grew to deeply envy the immortal elves, eventually seeing their own mortality not as a gift, but as a curse to the escaped at any cost. This fear made the King's Men easy targets for Sauron. He convinced them that their old faith was a lie, eventually leading them into direct worship of the darkness. This group became known as the Black Númenóreans. By embracing the dark arts, they permanently severed their connection to their noble ancestors and the elves. Their lifespans began to fail. In the centuries following the destruction of their homeland, the supposedly superior longevity of the Black Númenóreans rapidly waned until they were little more than ordinary men. The slow calcification of their culture mirrored the fate of their fleets. Over time, their wooden warships became petrified, immobile fossils in the sand. Beyond the wood, the infrastructure turns to iron. These mooring rings and massive chains are now covered in thick layers of oxidized metal. This ironwork marks the arrival of a new era, one defined by the kin strife. This was a brutal Gondorian civil war, fought over the purity of the royal bloodline. When the rebels were defeated in Gondor, the descendants of Castamir the Usurper migrated south. They fled down the coast and seized the ancient haven of Umbar for themselves. They didn't come alone. Castamir's forces stole a significant portion of Gondor's naval fleet during their retreat, ensuring the rebels remained a threat on the water. They repurposed the ancient harbor to launch a vendetta against their own kin, a war that would last for hundreds of years. These exiled Gondorians became the corsairs of Umbar. They shifted from political refugees to ruthless privateers, sustaining their city through plunder. Using Umbar as a hidden base, they launched hit-and-run raids on Gondor's southern coasts, striking settlements and taking slaves before disappearing back into the south. Their most successful attack occurred in the year 1634, when a corsair armada sacked the city of Peligir and killed the king of Gondor, Minardil. But an empire built on piracy eventually stalls. Centuries of harsh salt and sea air corroded their power, leaving their great chains fused solid by rust. At the highest point overlooking the harbor, millions of dull glass fragments are buried in the grit. They sit atop a toppled stone foundation. This was once a monument built by Ar-Pharazôn, the last king of Númenor. He erected it to mark the day he forced Sauron to surrender and swear fealty. In its original state, the pillar was crowned with a massive crystal globe. It captured the light of the sun and moon, shining like a star that could be seen from the Gondorian coast. Generations later, the inhabitants of Umbar fully surrendered to Sauron's will. They tore down this monument, destroying the symbol of their ancestors' victory over the Dark Lord. In the final years of the Third Age, Umbar sent a black fleet of 50 great ships to support Sauron's siege of Gondor. They never reached the battle. They were intercepted and destroyed at Peligir by Aragorn and the army of the dead. The Empire repeatedly chose the darkness, and the resulting collapse left behind only these scoured shards atop a broken hill. In the aftermath of the War of the Ring, the Haradrim who occupied the city were abandoned in the ruins. King Elisar eventually recaptured the city for Gondor, but no new empire rose from the wreckage. The harbor was left to the elements. In Umbar, there are no victors. There is only the grinding erasure of the sun and the sand.